Hi everyone, this is Pierrick from P2 Design. In this step-by-step tutorial, I will show you how you can create those stylized FXs to enhance your animation. Here we are in Blender. We absolutely don't need our camera, cube and light, so let's get rid of them. Press A to select everything and X to delete. The whole scene and the FXs are rendered using Eevee. And to create the streaks, we only need a simple plane. So let's press Shift A and add a plane. Then in the Properties panel, I will go to the material and create a new material that I will call streak. Whenever you create a plane in Blender, by default, it will already be unwrapped. From now on, I will switch to Material Preview. From there, I just like to show you that, as said before, the plane is already unwrapped. So if I enter Edit mode and I switch my timeline to the UV editor, I can see my plane projected on this 2D space, with X and Y coordinates going from 0 to 1. Most of the work will be on the material itself, so I will open the shader editor, and we don't need all the PBR fancy option of the principal BSDF. We will just need some emissive and a bit of transparency. So I will select the principal BSDF, get rid of it, and then I will add an emission shader and a transparent BSDF shader. Now we need a way to mix those both together, so I will press Shift A and add a mix shader. From there I will plug the principal BSDF into the first shader slot and the emission shader into the second shader slot, and the mix shader output in the input of our material output node. Now if I play with the mixing value, our material should become transparent. While it will be the case in cycles, in Eevee you have to specify it into the setting of the material. Setting it to alpha blend will allow you to get a progressive transparency. Visually, we have a behavior that is really comparable to what we would have with cycles. If we switch to alpha clip, the material can be whether fully transparent or fully opaque based on the threshold value. The threshold value is 0.5, so whenever I push the factor of the mix shader under 0.5, the object becomes fully transparent. Before we start working on our material, we can activate the ambient occlusion and the bloom in the properties panel under the rendering option. The ambient occlusion won't have that much influence on our current scene, but the bloom will generate a nice glowing effect whenever we will push the emission value of our shader. It's a viewport post-processing effect that will generate this glowing effect around high value pixels. So whenever we are pushing the emission of our shader, it does increase the value of the pixel. But we could get the same effect if we were to use a very strong light onto a white surface, for example. Now, to make our life easier, you must and should have by default go into your preferences and enabled the Node Wrangler add-on. It will give you access to additional tools and shortcuts in the shader editor. Now what I would like to do is to create a texture that will allow me to drive the transparency upon our plane. I will select the emission shader and press Ctrl T. This will automatically generate a mapping setup. Since we are going to use only procedural texture, we can get rid of the image texture node. We will be using the UV coordinates of our plane, and we can change the mapping type from point to texture. This will make the texture coordinate behavior a little easier to use. From there, I'd like to generate a gradient, so I will press Shift A, go to Texture and add a gradient texture node. From there, I will plug the mapping node into the gradient texture. If I now Ctrl Shift left click the gradient texture, I will be able to preview it. For the time being, we have a linear gradient. I'd like to have a quadratic sphere, so I will change it in the gradient texture node. For the time being, the center of the gradient is stuck on the bottom left corner of our plane, and I'd like it to be centered in the middle of the plane. Since we are using the UV coordinates, and as they go from 0 to 1, we can offset the center of the gradient by moving it by 0.5 on the x-axis and do the same on the y-axis. we can change this location in the mapping node using the location input. Now the gradient is centered into our plane, and if we use it as a mix factor to our mix shader, any gray value under 0.5 will become transparent. We can disable the outliner to have a better preview of our material, and to better show you the gradient behavior, I will add a color ramp between the gradient texture and the mix shader. As I push the dark value, it darkens the outside of our gradient and our plane become more transparent. From there, we can easily bring a bit of details to our shape by simply adding a texture noise texture. You can plug in the mapping node or you can leave it like that, it doesn't matter. Then I will duplicate the color ramp node so that we can control the contrast of the texture and plug the factor of the texture in the color ramp. I will then control shift left click the color ramp to see the result. If I push the black value, we can see our noise texture becoming darker. You can tweak the different options of the noise texture and see what happened. I will just increase a bit the scale to 7 so that we have smaller detail. Now I'd like to blend this noise texture with our gradient texture. So I will add a color mix RGB node. I will plug into the first color input the first color ramp from our gradient, and in the second the color ramp from our noise texture. Now if I change the value of the mix shader, I will have whether my noise or my gradient. And if we use this color to mix both our emission and transparent shader, as I increase a bit the factor, I will bring a bit of noise in my round gradient texture. But if we push the factor value too far, we will only have the noise and we will lose our round shape. So keep it between 0.1 and 0.3. From there, I will give myself a bit of space and I will add another color ramp that we will use to drive the color of the emission shader, so that we can create some color pattern into our weird shape. So I will just plug in the color from our mix RGB into this color ramp, the color ramp into the emission shader, and I will switch the blending mode of the color ramp from linear to constant. This way we will no longer have smooth transition in our gradient, but a succession of solid color. So you can add additional color by clicking the plus button and then select 3 or 4 different colors that will please you. I will go for some fiery colors from the red to yellow, and then I will tweak the flag position to adjust my pattern. From there, I will control shift click again my mix shader to see the result, and I will adjust my color ramp so that the 3 colors doesn't get clipped by the transparency. From there, we can push a bit the strength of the emission shader to get a bit of glowing. And this is our base material. If you want to learn how to create this badass animation, check out my course Alive. It's the most extensive Blender animation course released to this date, with over 150 videos, more than 28 hours of content, and exclusive character rigs. You will find the link in the description below. Enough self-promotion, let's jump into the tutorial. Our FX animation will be super simple. Basically, what we are going to do is play with the scaling of our object. Whenever you are scaling an object in Blender or in any 3D software, it happens around the origin of the object, the little orange dot in the middle. What I want is to offset this origin point. There are multiple ways to do it, but what I will do is press Tab to enter edit mode, select all the vertices with A, and then press G, Y, and 1 to offset my vertices by 1 Blender unit. Now when I scale my object, you can see that it still happened around the origin, but it gives the impression that our pattern is also moving along the y-axis. I will scale it along the x-axis to give it a more elongated shape. We now check our object properties. We can see that it has an uneven scaling. To make the current scale becoming its default scale, I will press Ctrl A in object mode and choose All Transform. You can choose scale if you want. As I confirm, you will see that all our scale value turn to 1. From there, we can start animating those values. With my mouse over those values, I will press the I key. This will insert a keyframe on all the scale values. To be able to manipulate those keyframes, I will open the graph editor. If I now change the Z scale value, we can see that nothing happens, because our plane has no thickness. I can head over to the graph editor, expose the transform channel of my plane, and get rid of the Z scale curve by selecting it and pressing X. Now I want to reduce the range of my animation, so I will go to frame 40 and press Ctrl N on the keyboard. The X scale value will allow us to make our shape larger, the Y value longer. I will go into the document properties and I will change the animation rate to 30 frames per second. Since I generally animate for game, this is my default frame rate. I will go on frame 3 and then I will increase the scale on the Y axis. As I do so, the Y scale channel becomes orange. It means that its value has changed, but it hasn't been recorded by Blender. I will set the value to something around 5, and then I will go into the graph editor and press I and choose all channels. This will insert a new keyframe on frame 3, and as I do so, you will see my scale value become yellow. Yellow means that we have a keyframe on the specific transform channel. Green means that it's animated. We can ask Blender to automatically generate keyframe by opening the timeline and clicking the record button. If you don't want Blender to insert a keyframe on all your transform channel and keep your graph editor clean, go to the Preferences, Animation and choose Only Insert Available. This is my default setup. From there, let's manipulate a bit our curves. I will disable the overlay so that I see only my effect. I will select the key on frame 3 of my Y scale curve and I will move it up a bit. Then I will press Shift D to duplicate it on frame 6. I will push it up even more. As I do so, we can see our object getting longer. Then I will select the X curve on frame 1 and slightly push it up. This will make our object slightly larger in the beginning of the animation. I will then select key on frame 3, duplicate it on frame 5 by pressing Shift D, X and moving it by 2 frames. Then I will move my playhead on frame 11 and I will insert a X scale value of 0. And as our plane gets closer to a value of 0 on the X scale, it's slowly disappear, becoming thinner and thinner. From there, on frame number 6, I will select the key of the Y scale curve. I will duplicate it on frame 11 and I will push its value up. I will set the end of the animation to frame 16. I can press the spacebar to play my animation. I will slightly push the key on frame 6 up to smooth a bit my curve. And to accelerate the beginning of my animation, I will select the keys on frame 1 and press V to change them to vector. It will slightly modify the shape of the curve, making it raising right at the beginning. You can play your animation to see the result. The cool thing is that since we have just animated the scaling value, we can move our object in space, we can duplicate it, rotate it as many times as we want to create additional streaks. Then to create a bit of variation, I will select one of them, select all the keys but the first one and offset them by 1 frame to the right. This will delay the motion. I will select the other streak and this time I will offset of 1 frame to the left all the keys but the first. The animation of this third streak will be 1 frame faster. From there, if you want, you can push a bit the curve of the third streak to create even more variation. Then you can duplicate those streaks, rotate them a bit to create some kind of cone shape with the different streaks. From there, if you want, you can add a camera, position your 3D view and press Ctrl-Alt-0 so that the camera fits your current 3D view. From there, you can head to the camera option and in viewport display, push the passepartout opacity to 1 so that you don't get distracted by what is out of frame. And our streak effect is done. Let's now create the shockwave effect. The first thing we need is to create a disk mesh. So I will go back into my 3D view and I will press Shift A and add a circle. Then in edit mode, I will press E to extrude the circle and S to scale it down. We want the inner loop to be very small, so I will scale it down even more. And then I will select everything and press U to unwrap the mesh. If we now open the UV image editor, we can see our circle unwrapped. But what I would like, instead of having a circular UV map, it's to have a squared UV map, so that all the points in the middle of my circle will be on one side and all the other points on the outer of the circle will be on the other side. This way, if I make a texture sliding along the UVs horizontally, it will slide on our mesh following the circle shape. Don't worry, it will make sense in a few seconds. To quickly prepare my mesh, I will switch to face selection mode and I will select one face of my mesh. In the UV editor, I will switch to edge selection mode. I will select the right edge, press S, X and 0 to scale the edge along the X-axis to 0. This will align the points vertically. I will do the same with the opposite edge and then I will repeat the process with the horizontal edge scaling on Y to 0. Now that I have squared this face, I can select them all. The face we have corrected should appear in white, meaning that it's active. And then I will press U to unwrap and choose Follow Active Quads. Blender will unwrap again our mesh, but this time into a ribbon shape following the shape we have created with the first face. From there, we need to move and scale those UVs to make sure that they match the UV space. Help ourselves in the UV option, I will enable Constraint to Image Bounds. This way our UVs will not get out of the UV space. From there, scale and move the UV island so that it fills the whole UV space. Once we are done with this, we can edit our material. I have exit edit mode and I will browse for my material library and I will apply the same material as our streaks. From there you can click one of those two icons to duplicate it. I will rename this new material Shockwave and I will open the shader editor. If I now shift left click the color ramp from our first gradient node and in the gradient node change the gradient type to linear, we can see that our gradient is following the disk. And this is not what we want. I'd like it to go from the center to the outer edge of our mesh. To do so, I simply need to go back to the UV image editor, then enter edit mode on my mesh, select all the vertices in the UV editor and rotate them by 90 degrees. Now we do see our gradient going from the middle of our mesh to the outside of our mesh. Now using the color ramp, I can click the plus button to create a new flag. I will move it to the right and set it to a black color. This way we have a gradient that is black on the inside and the outside of our mesh. And if I Ctrl Shift click my mix shader to see our current material, we can see that both the inner and outer edge are now transparent. From there, if we play with the location value of our texture on X and Y, we can make it slide whether around the disk or along the disk. And by animating this value, we will be able to create our shockwave effect. First, we don't need our noise texture to follow the motion of the disk. So I can unplug the mapping node from the noise texture. Now when I play with the X location value, we can see our gradient sliding, but the noise doesn't move and it creates a nice wobbling effect. Now I'd like to have a smooth transition on the outer edge of the disk. To do so, I will first duplicate both the gradient texture and the color ramp, selecting them both and pressing Shift D. I need to use the UV coordinates to drive this gradient, but I don't want to animate them, so I will directly plug the UV output of my texture coordinates into the gradient texture. Also, I just want the black gradient to be on the outside edge of the disk. So I will select the first black flag and click on the minus button to get rid of it. Now, to be able to mix this new gradient on top of the other, I will simply duplicate the Mix RGB node, set its blending mode to multiply, and then plug into the second color slot our newly created color ramp. This new Mix RGB is already plugged into the mix factor of our shader. For the time being, we will set its value to 0, to something between 0.2 and 0.4. And now I can play with my X location value. The negative value will shrink it down, and when we push it toward 1, it will expand or explode. So we are almost done with our material creation. The only thing we have to do is now use our Mix RGB to also drive the color of our emission shader. Now our Shockwave object and materials are done and we can animate it. The first thing I will do is just to scale and rotate my Shockwave so that it better fit my camera view. From there, I will reopen my graph editor and expand it. Then I will focus on my mapping node, reduce the X location value until my effect disappears, and then with my mouse upon those location value, I will press I to insert a keyframe. To be able to see those curves in the graph editor, I need to select the mapping node, and I will get rid of the Y and Z location curve since we won't be animating them as they are useless for this effect. Then I will duplicate my key, I will move it to frame 8, and I will push the value up until my effect totally disappears on the outer edge. In my case, a value of 0.78 seems to be matching. From there, I will select my first keyframe and I will switch its handle to vector, selecting it, pressing V and choosing vector. And now I can test my animation. The shockwave is way too fast, so I will take the key on frame number 8 and I will offset it in time along the x-axis. Then I will select it again and I will press S to scale it a bit. This way, the motion will be very fast in the beginning and then it will slow down as it disappears, creating a nice damping effect. From there, you can tweak your curve or tweak the position of your FXs to create whatever you want. Now that you have created your effect, you can move it in space, rotate it. You can't scale it because we are animating the scaling. But if you want to offset the animation in time, just select all the objects and all their curve and move them along the x-axis in the graph editor. Then select all the streaks and on the frame before their first keyframe, scale them to 0 so that they will disappear. Double check the shockwave effect curve so that it doesn't appear until we trigger it. This is how I create my FXs for my animations. I hope you've enjoyed this video and I will see you in the next one.